Hi, this is Jas Obrecht. Welcome to my Talking Guitar podcast. This episode presents a rare interview with Irish guitar legend Rory Gallagher. At the time of this conversation, I was an editor for Guitar Player magazine. I'd also been a devout fan of Rory's music since the early 1970s and had collected all of his albums. So I was excited to have an opportunity to speak with him in person. The interview you're about to hear came down on the afternoon of March 15th, 1991. We met backstage at the Catalyst Club in Santa Cruz, California. Rory had just released his final studio album, Fresh Evidence, and was midway through what was to be his last American tour. As we began to talk, I was delighted to discover that Rory was insightful, self-effacing, down-to-earth, and just an all-around sweet person. He displayed an extraordinary knowledge of American blues music and was refreshingly candid about his recordings, playing techniques, guitars and gear, and the personal issues that had prevented him from touring overseas. Now, without further ado, on to the interview.
I really like your new record. One of the things I admire about your playing is that you really seem to stay true to the music you've played for.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I think that you have to recognize the kind of source point that you have, and even though you develop as a player over the years, and you get influenced by different things, it's you have to keep the heart of what you started with, and that kind of initial vision of music.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's taken me this amount of time to learn a lot of different things about music and playing and so on, but I think I'm getting there slowly.
You seem to gravitate towards roots American music throughout your career.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, even though I grew up in a kind of in Ireland where there's a lot of folk music and traditional music is very close at hand, it didn't initially appeal to me, even though I can see traces of it creeping in over the years in my songwriting and some chord patterns and some kinds of solos I do, but I really wasn't turned on until I heard American music via Lonnie Donegan. I heard him doing Woody Guthrie songs, Lead Belly songs,
Yeah.
and of course I heard Elvis Presley, Eddie Cochran, the early rockers, Chuck Berry. So it was a mixture of folk, blues, and rock from America. I was only 6, 7, 8, 9
Yeah.
that age, and then I just followed it through and learned about all these artists, and um, I'm still discovering undiscovered people and learning. But it took me about a good 10 or 15 years to find out who was who in the whole spectrum of things. Who were the originators or the prime movers, and who were the followers and the copyists and what have
Yeah.
you. So
For young people who aren't acquainted with the Sun Houses of the world, who would you recommend, or are there any records you'd recommend that young guitar players seek out or listen to or expose themselves to?
Well, I mean, everyone's stating the obvious Robert Johnson collection, but that he seems to be the virtuoso of that era or that point. But I mean, Sunhouse would be very important, in as much as that he gave lessons, I believe, to Robert Johnson. He probably wrote uh, Walking Blues, for instance, and he was very close. And Muddy Waters also claims that Sunhouse was important at the time, but it depends. You see, it's very hard to dictate to some youngster who might listen to Albert King and immediately see themselves in that lineage, Whereas, but I think all young players, rock and blues players, should dig deeper back beyond the obvious big blues stars like B.B. King and Buddy Guy, who are all great. But I'm very interested also in the country blues and the electrified country blues, as I would call it. Big Joe Williams and things like that. But I also like all the slide players from Earl Hooker through Muddy Waters, obviously, but Robert Nighthawk's a favourite of mine, and I eventually discovered Tampa Red kind of late on, and he's very smooth playing,
Yeah.
So like that lick that Muddy Waters is known for, is actually is we all thought that was kind of an original Muddy Waters thing, but he got it from Tampa Red. So
Yeah.
this folk music tradition of passing on and picking up and stealing inverted commas goes on like mad, So, but I mean, my own style, being a European, very influenced by American music and so on, I've tried to find a way that if I'm doing a blues number, I can do it very traditional if I want to.
Right.
I can also add my own element or my own twists to it. And if I'm doing a rock song with a blues thing in it, I can be, I try to be adventurous and progressive in some material, and others I try to be as down home and as ethnic as possible.
We hear that in like Empire State.
Yeah, well, that was as close to. I did that in one take on purpose. I did it St. Patrick's Night, oddly enough, just
Really?
last year. It was the last track on the album, and I loved the song, and I lost the album that I had, so I had to remember it. Luckily I'd written the lyrics down, and I'd do it close enough to Son House's style, but not. I to sing it in the tempo I was doing it. I had to slightly adjust the rhythm a bit, but I thought it was a great song, and I thought it was a very overlooked song.
Yeah.
And Al Wilson of Candid played national guitar on one or two tracks on that particular album.
Right. That's the Death Letter record?
That's right, with Pearline and Prauline, whatever.
Yeah,
and,
Pearline.
Yeah, and John the Revelator. That's another great song on that.
Yeah.
But and then Ghost Blues, even though it's that's quite traditional in its approach with the dobro and the national.
Yeah.
And the mood also on what do you call it? Middle Name is very much that's the guitar, and that is more like a Slim Harpo record.
Yeah.
So the album's all kinds of references all over the place. A couple of rock tracks, all right, but even Kid Gloves, Slumming Angel, Walking Wounded. The rest are very much in the blues feel, I think.
Very much.
The King of Zydeco, even though it's about Clifton Chenier, it's almost countryish more than Zydeco in the feel. But by the time the accordion comes in and the maracas, we did try the washboard on it to see if we could get what his brother's rub board, as they call it, but it didn't work in that song. But we laid down another track called Never Asked You for Nothing, which nearly made it to the album, but it's one of those 15th songs that would crop up again,
Yeah.
And we were lucky enough to find this guy, Garrett Watkins, who's an enthusiast of Cajun music and Zydeco music, and plays great boogie-woogie piano and rock and roll piano. And he's played a lot with Dave Edmunds, and he's played piano with the Stray Cats and so on. And he has his own group called the Balham Alligators.
Balham?
Balham, which is
like the angel?
No, Balham is an area in London, in South London. So it's a bit of a funny name, really.
How do you spell that?
Balham.
Oh, okay.
Balham Alligators. Which is a ludicrous name, yeah. But that's the way it is. But so it was also production-wise, the album. Like I was very keen on the album before, which was called Defender, which had a lot of blues elements in it as well, but it's more of a rock production, whereas this is kind of not mellow, but we didn't overdo the compression and we didn't overdo the cleaning up and the noise gates and things like that. We left it fairly woolly and casual, which is the way I think it suits the songs, But I hope people catch up on Defender, because that's an album that's still quite current in the set, even though we move the repertoire around every night,
What year was Defender? 2 years ago?
2 years ago, yeah.
And released in England?
Released in England and all over Europe, but it'll be released here in 2 weeks' time, in fact.
Oh, great.
So it'll be running concurrently with this new album. But obviously the emphasis is on Fresh Evidence,
Yeah. Defender has more of a rock stance, you said?
A rock sound. There's some tough songs that like Kickback City and Road to Hell. But there are some blues songs, like one of the numbers we do is called the Continental Op, which was influenced by Dashiell Hammett as one of his characters. And even though it's a rock boogie feel, it's very much a John Lee Hooker chording
Yeah.
suspended fourths and things like that. It also had a song called Lone Shark Blues, which was there again a bit like a Slim Harpo, shake your hips type of feel to it.
Yeah.
But it had some nice lyrics. But a down and out guy, in debt to the loan shark, and very fast, alliteration type lyrics. And there's a song called Ain't No Saint, which is very much a Albert Collins dash Albert King feel.
Yeah.
But I'd like to get to the point where it'll be a Rory Gallagher feel rather than. But you have to refer to all these obvious inspirers or influencers, because.
Although there's definitely a certain Rory Gallagher feel. Slumming Angel, Living Like a Trucker. I mean, there's a continuum between those songs, at least
like
to my ears.
Yeah.
Which was one of my favorite songs when I was in school.
I remember that one quite well because we had the clavinet with the wah-wah. I was so straight-laced then I wouldn't play a wah-wah pedal myself.
Really?
It's like somebody joked to me the other night they were disappointed to hear certain equipment I was using and that they didn't even want me to use electricity. Some people have this image of you as so purist that you wouldn't even use.
They've obviously never heard Taste at Isle of Wight.
Well, but this is the way it goes. But Living like a Trucker, I like that track myself. But that's going to come out on all those albums are going to come out in the next year or two on IRS on CD with lyric sheets and some will be slightly remixed and helped out, EQ'd and things just for CD. So with this absence behind me, it'll be great to have all my old material out again.
Yeah.
And people can look at it and see if it's held up in court or if it's not. Or if it's, I think it hasn't dated too badly.
I think Blueprint.
Yeah.
The new live record, all that'll stand well.
That's good.
When you're recording solos, you definitely have your own style and sound. Do you? What do you expect from yourself? Like, what do you think a Rory Gallagher solo should be about?
Well, see, I try and split the difference between being fairly clever and technical and still primitive.
Yeah.
Because I think if it's just a technical exercise, that's all very well. But even as a solo has to be lean towards the primitive, so be it. But I mean, it depends on the song. If you have to play very calculated, or if you're overdubbing the solo, sometimes. I used to always go for live leads and mistakes and all, and just for feel. But now I'm prepared. If a certain song needs a very, very hard sort of melodic type of solo, I'm prepared to work on it over and over. Yeah. But I try not to get into the habit of dropping in, punching in, yeah. Because it's very tempting to get the perfect solo. But I mean, I have been guilty of it once or twice, but only just to save, to put if you're really in a great direction. But as a rule, I try and keep keep a grip on technology so it doesn't take the human factor out of it, and you get too lazy about things,
Has technology impacted the way you make records? Was recording the new record different than recording Blueprint or Tattoo?
A little bit different, yeah. Of course, we've gone to 24 track now from both those albums were 8 track.
Yeah.
I mean, when we went 16 track, I thought that was the year 2000. I mean, and then the echoes. In fact, on this album, we brought in tape echoes, reverb, spring reverb. We tried to use, the more vintage equipment.
Yeah.
We did use obviously certain modern EQs. I'm not that mad about digital equipment, and obviously if you had to clean up something, you would use a noise gate, very subtly.
Yeah.
But performance-wise, I don't think there's that much difference, except that we probably were a bit more rigid in those days about getting it. We still try and get in the first take, but we're little. I mean, I would repair something now if I thought it was a great performance, whereas in the early days, I'm sure we put, just because of a repair, we could have saved some tracks, but we were very keen on getting it as was, even with the Telecaster whistling and everything.
Yeah.
It was a ridiculous kind of attitude, but that's the way I thought. You see, we needn't have been so strict with ourselves, but that's the way we were.
Yeah.
I had the same attitude to Echo as well. I was very conservative in that area, which probably was a mistake, but you learn as you go along.
Yeah.
You know. It also depends on the engineer that you're working with and the confidence you have in him and the whole sound and feel. But I still think the approach for performance isn't that different from the early records, but we're probably a little more aware of what's sonically possible now and what we could do. And also, all those early albums were done in 3 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Whereas albums now take,
That's incredible.
6 months nearly, this album, between remixes and retakes and what have you, you know.
Did you tend to try to avoid layering tracks and go for live as much as possible?
Yes, in general. I also went for a strong rhythm guitar part
Mm-hmm.
in tracks like Middle Name and King of Zydeco and Walking Wounded. Instead of the Strat, for instance, I've got this small Chet Atkins Gretsch, which is great for rhythm with fairly heavy strings.
6120?
Not the Eddie Cochran model,
Okay.
the Les Paul shaped one,
Oh, okay.
the little orange one.
Yeah.
And that was great for rhythm. And I used a Les Paul Jr. on the rhythm part of Kid Gloves and also the rhythm part of Walking Wounded and let me see, I can't remember. But even though I'm identified with the Strat and I like the Strat, I think if you have Strat rhythm and Strat lead, except in the Hendrix situation, I think it can be a little bit one-dimensional. So it's nice to have an alternative guitar to broaden the sound. Yeah. Even a Telecaster sounds good for rhythm and then Strat for lead. But it depended on the track, as I said. You know.
Huh.
So,
do you still have the old Strat that you used
mm-hmm.
on all those records?
Yeah, it's super glued together now.
Really? Albert King's has just been super glued back together.
Oh.
Yeah, his Flying V.
Great. Yeah.
His bus flipped over.
Oh, yeah?
And it landed in a river.
With them all on board, the band on board as well?
No, he wasn't hurt at all. It was just his
God.
equipment. But I'm friends with the guy who made it, and Albert sent it back, and he had super glued together.
Yeah, I always liked the out of phase sound he had, because which he'd never give you any information about his tuning or his anything. And also he was one of the few bluesmen that I know that was using acoustic transistor amps, solid state, which had a distortion control on them.
Yeah.
Steve Winwood used to use one all right when he was with Blind Faith, but and I think even when he on the Gary Moore album when Albert was working on it, he was actually playing through a Roland 120, you know, the JC 120, which is a transistor. But so obviously he's at home with them. But then the pickups on the Flying V's are very full and warm, and they can take the match up with the solid state. You know.
It's funny, when Albert sent this guy the guitar to repair, he put it in a burlap sack without a case and wrapped some rope around it and sent it by Greyhound bus. And the guy asked him why he did it, and he said it was too good a case to risk having anything happen to it.
That's funny.
That's Albert.
That's strange. It's like the story of Mike Bloomfield showing up to record with Bob Dylan with the Telecaster without a case.
Yeah, right.
I mean, and a zipper bag. I mean, it's great. That casual thing is great, you know. But everything's gone into flight cases now. But we still have a few funky areas left in terms of cases. But I mean, the more you travel around the world, you really have to be cautious of your instruments, because it's only when they get stolen or they get broken that you really miss them at that particular show, you know.
Have you lost instruments?
We've lost a few. No, we've been very. I did actually have the Stratocaster stolen in Dublin in the 60s, and that was. I got it back after 2 weeks because they had a police program on TV.
Oh, that's great.
And they put it on there, and I lost a Telecaster at the same. Somebody broke into the van and stole the Strat, and a Telecaster which was only on loan to me, that never came back. But I got the Strat back. It was found over a ditch, and with a few extra scratches from the brambles and things. So when I got it back, it had been out in the rain as well. So I mean, I swore I'd never sell it or paint it after that, because I had to borrow a guitar to get me through that fortnight, and I had given up hope in getting it back, the guitar, to be honest with you. and I really couldn't afford another Strat at the time.
Yeah.
I was playing a Burns, which a roadie had
Oh.
lent me. You know. But that's the way it goes. But it's playing well. It's obviously machine heads, frets, pots, and things have been changed over the years.
Yeah.
But it's still the same.
Do you know what year it is originally?
It's November '61, and I got it in August, I think, of '63. So it was second hand. It was the first Stratocaster in Ireland, apparently. But the guy who ordered it wanted a red one, like Hank Marvin.
Mm-hmm.
And they sent him a Sunburst one instead. So he had to wait for a year and a half or whatever to get the red one, and then he sold this one through the shop. So I got it. You know, I thought it was. You know, prior to that, I had a loan of a guitar, and I had one electric Solid 7, which was an Italian, very flimsy guitar.
Yeah.
Which used to distort and everything through this 4-watt little giant amplifier I had. I wish I had it now as a tune-up amp, because it was like a kind of like a pig nose type of sound, you know,
Yeah.
which was totally, in those days you'd be trying to get the clean sound of Hank Marvin or the Ventures
Right.
or whatever, Buddy Holly, but when I got the Strat, I was set. That was.
It must have been a real happy day for you.
Oh, it was. I mean, for weeks, every morning I'd wake up, I'd go over and look at the guitar in the case and, and treat it like a living being, you know, or some kind of magical thing. And even the smell of the case, I mean, I was really standing on my head at that time. But,
do you still travel with it?
no, I do, yeah.
Wow.
You know, I don't necessarily carry it myself on the plane, but we've got it taken care of, you know, just watch it.
Yeah.
But I luckily I have a 57 as well, which is in great condition. I got that from a guitar player called Robert Johnson, of all people.
From Texas?
He's actually based in Memphis, or used to be.
Yeah, he had a record once in
Yeah.
the 70s.
And he worked with John Entwistle and so on.
Yeah.
So I got it through him anyway, and it's a great guitar, and I've used that on the albums when I don't use the old Strat. It's more of a 50s sound. It's more of a clean rockabilly, Buddy Holly sound. Let me see, on the record I used it on, I can't remember offhand, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little more, because of the maple neck, it's if you want a real zingy, because my own Strat is actually, even though it's a classic Strat, I suppose, it has, because of the age and the sweat in it and everything else, the tone is a lot dirtier and raunchier than your standard Strat. It borders on the sound of an SG almost sometimes, I think, or a real raw telly, which suits me. But this 57's nice, you know. And all I've done to that was just change I put the big frets on. I like the jumbo frets.
Yeah.
And I also disconnect the middle control, which is the tone pot for the rhythm pickup. So on both Strats I have the lower tone pot as a master tone.
Oh, yeah.
Because I always miss that I like that on a Telecaster. You can adjust the tone on the lead pickup.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that Fender had was that in those days you played rhythm on the rhythm pickup and the middle pickup, and then you clicked into the Peggy Sue position. And
yeah, it's almost like a cowboy guitar.
Yeah. Of course, in the early days, you see some bands didn't have bass or bass guitar.
Right.
As you know, and same with the Telecasters. In the rhythm position, they had that big capacitor to create a big boomy bass lines, you know.
Yeah.
In fact, Muddy Waters, up until a couple of years before he died, he left his guitar in that style, so he could get that real booming rhythm thing, you know.
He played that telly till the very end, as far as I know.
The red telly. He apparently the neck was a replacement neck. The guitar was originally white or blonde, and the Fender of Chicago, there must have been a branch there, gave him a neck with an extra thick back to it.
Yeah.
So that's what happened there. But Muddy had a great feel. I mean, even when he wasn't playing slide, the figures he would play, particularly with Jimmy Rogers.
Yeah.
And of course Sam Lawhorn, who just passed away fairly lately.
Yeah, 7 weeks ago, was it?
That's right.
Yeah.
So
you were so lucky to have gotten to work with Muddy at all.
I was, yeah.
Yeah.
Haunted. I mean, originally Al Cooper was going to produce that album, and he made the call, and they changed producers then, and the project was back on. But I mean, I was obviously delighted, and it was 3 nights. I was playing every night gigs at the same time, and they would hold up the session till midnight till I got there.
Oh man!
And he was sitting
What
there
an
tuning his
honor.
guitar. Yeah, and his glass of sparkling wine, and just handed it to me. And I'm treating a 23-year-old youngster. I mean,
Yeah.
but I mean, it was serious business. It wasn't because he had half his own band there, and then he had Mitch Mitchell on drums, Steve
Yeah.
Winwood on piano, and so we had a good time. But it had to be done. They remixed it back in Chicago, I think.
Yeah.
But they've brought a few spare tracks from it out on some of these compilation or these
Yeah.
best of series, you know.
What was it like working with Albert? Was he a rasty kind of guy?
Well, he was. The situation was he showed up in Montreux. It was all arranged to be recorded, and his second guitarist left him on the day. So they asked me would I stand in. He asked me himself, and I said no, because his material is quite arranged. It's not
Yeah.
loose like Muddy's, you know.
Yeah.
So they just, you know, he's a more intense guy than Muddy, I thought, not as friendly. But,
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I hate to say it, but just I was forced to sit in and just fill out as best I could, and there was no rehearsing, no nothing, and then you just had to guess what key he was in. Anytime I asked him what key it was, he'd say B natural.
Yeah.
And he's playing in minors. His tuning is like E minor 6th or 7th, as far as I know, back to front. So I just had to busk it, but it was an experience. I got over it. Yeah.
Man, dude, I heard Mike Bloomfield say something real telling once. He was talking about being on stage with Hendrix.
Oh yeah.
And they were kind of having at it a little bit, and he said Jimmy just pulled out all the stops, and Mike, the way Mike talked, you know, the way he described it was like bombs exploding and World War III going on. And he told me that all I could think was, I wish to God that I were Albert King.
Yeah.
What a compliment.
So, yeah. If Albert wants to nail you to the wall, he's got that amazing attack, and he just hits that one single note type syndrome.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was a Hendrix fan and a Bloomfield fan. I met Mike once. We did a TV show, Midnight Special, when the Electric Flag reformed. And he was a very nice and modest guy.
He was.
And a beautiful player, a really soulful player. And and he wouldn't. I can see him in the situation with Hendrix where he wouldn't go into that trickery, really. You know.
Yeah. No, he wouldn't.
But it's a compliment to Mike if Jimmy was scared, because normally Hendrix was quite prepared to lay back and even play bass on these jam sessions.
Yeah.
So.
This was on stage in New York, Mike said.
Probably at the Scene Club.
That's it.
Yeah.
Had you met Jimmy?
I never met him. I saw him playing 2 times, but 3 shows, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I was in the Speakeasy Club in London once, and he was sitting up a couple of tables away talking to someone, and I had the guts to go over and annoy him. You know, that's happened to me a few times. And you regret it later. I mean, all you got to do is shake their hand and make contact, and you know, because these people pass through this world and you don't ever get to say hello to them, you know.
If you could somehow transcend time and see any musicians play, who would be tops on your list? People you'd like to have witnessed, living or dead?
There's a whole glut of. I'd like to have seen. I mean, I'd like to have seen Django Reinhardt live. I believe that was scary. Obviously, I'd like to have seen Robert Johnson. Who wouldn't?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd like to have seen the first Sonny Boy Williamson. You know, there's so many people.
Yeah.
I'd like to have seen Buddy Holly live as well, for that matter. I didn't see Sunhouse live, but I was lucky enough in the 60s. I saw a lot of the main people. I saw Muddy, I saw Johnny Hooker, Big Joe Williams, I saw T-Bone Walker, and we were lucky enough touring the States. We played with Freddie King, we played with Juke Boy Bonner. I saw. I'd actually seen Blind Boy Fuller live, mind you.
Yeah.
Although he was in the line of Blind Boy Blake, but and I saw Gary Davis. So I'm pretty lucky, really. But I mean, certainly some of the early people I'd like to have seen.
Now, Blind Boy Fuller is a fairly obscure figure even today. How did you happen to come across his music? Is it the Erhuli record?
It isn't
Or
the
the Blues Classics,
The
rather?
Blues Classics, yeah, with
That record?
Bull City Red on it and Sonny Terry
Step
plays.
It Up and Go On
Yes.
and all that?
And Three Ball Blues.
Yeah,
and,
right.
I think I just...
Wasn't he a wonderful player?
Oh, it's great. Great
Man.
altogether, yeah. And Scrapper Blackwell I liked a lot.
Yeah.
Particularly they recorded when he was about 71 or something like
Right,
that.
right,
And he was in great form. In fact, when I went back and listened to the original recordings with Leroy Carr, I was slightly disappointed because he'd actually improved to my ears as a player. But then the early records were fairly recorded very dull. You know, you couldn't really hear the guitar that well. But that was the surprising thing in that blues revival, that Furry Lewis, John Hurt, a lot of them they'd improved as opposed to going the other way. You know, it was fantastic.
Especially Furry.
Yeah.
His slide playing got so magnificent when he was older.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people still alive that are still. I mean, I hope now that John Lee Hooker has this big hit, and that Albert King and Albert Collins are doing well, and B.B. King, that it'll draw in some of the more less known guys like John Littlejohn and
Johnny
Shines, Johnny Young. I mean, they're not the classy players, but I mean they all have nice rough sounds. I think, you know.
Honey Boy Edwards is still getting gigs.
Yes, yeah. Where's he living now?
He's living in somewhere in Ohio.
Is that right? Yeah.
In fact, I might have his address in my briefcase there. I have Shines' address.
Is that right?
He's a sweet old man.
Yeah.
He had a stroke. He can't play real well, but his voice is the best Delta voice I've ever heard in person.
Yeah. That's great. That's some project you're on. You're doing something I should do, really. Yeah, and I use the Dad Gad tuning, which out in the Western Plain, the Leadbelly song.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favourite tunings. That was supposed to be discovered by Davy Graham,
right,
a Scottish guitarist, and then it was used a lot by Brett Jansch and Martin Carthy, all great players,
right,
in the different ways. I've been messing around with drop D lately, which is taking down the bottom D and the top D. That's quite nice, and open A is just related to open G. I use that a lot as well, depending on the capo.
What did you use on the record for the slide tunes?
Let me see. Well, open G, even though Ghost Blues is in A, the guitar was tuned to G.
Mm-hmm.
The slide on Walking Wounded is just in standard tuning, which I can do. Let me see. On Empire State Express is open G. I think any other slide parts are all in standard tuning. In the same way as Earl Hooker could play chords and then go into a solo.
God, that guy. Yeah, Muddy told me one time that Earl Hooker was the guy, the best there ever was. And
he used to play great single string guitar too, particularly
sure did.
On the early Junior Wells records. On the original Messing with the Kid, he plays great slurpy Stratocaster songs. Before he went over to the Dan Electro, and then he went on to that Gibson.
Right. His songs like Anna Lee, though, the slide playing is just out of this world.
But Anna Lee and Sweet Black Angel are both, as you know, Robert Nighthawk songs. But I mean, he was the first guy, aside from Hendrix, that I could accept the wah-wah pedal from. Cause,
I had trouble with Earl's wah-wah. Sometimes he went overboard.
Well, it's like any of these...
psychedelic, man.
Yeah. Well, I think what turned a lot of people... It was the Howlin' Wolf record, where they added so much wah-wah pedal. Remember that one that came out around the time?
Yeah, with Pete Cozy
Electric
playing
Mud.
wah-wah.
Yeah, and I can't remember who else was on the album. But the liner notes were funny. They even put on the front that Howlin' Wolf doesn't like this record, but then
He didn't like his
electric
electric guitar. That was a great record.
Yeah.
We interviewed Pete Cozy, who played on Howlin' Wolf Session and played some stuff with Miles Davis too.
Oh, really?
And there's a quote in there where he said that he showed up for the session and he had real long hair and a beard, which was unusual for a black guy in those days.
Yeah.
And Howlin' Wolf said, "Why don't you throw all that wah-wah and shit in the lake on your way over to get to the barber shop?"
Oh,
That's how he like met the guy.
Yeah. Well, yeah. That's.
Hubert Sumlin was really underrated. He's trying to make a comeback.
It's a
He's up in
shame.
Wisconsin.
Is he?
Yeah.
How's his health? Is he okay?
Yeah, I've heard he's pretty good lately.
Yeah. It's just that he's made some records that I've got since the Wolf days, but he's either produced the wrong way, or the material's not there, or he misses Wolf, or all that chemistry that went on.
Well, I think that Hammond Scott and those producers have them with their house players, and I think Hubert should be a guy who's allowed to pick his own band and do his own material his own way.
It's important, really.
Yeah, very important.
Yeah.
It's too generic otherwise, it seems.
Well, a lot of people think they know best, and once they get this producer mentality, I know it's an important job, but some people can be extremely unsympathetic to what's right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then there's all these, as the years move on, everything becomes tighter in terms of budgets, PR, pressure, and all these other factors. But Hubert's a guy who deserves his hour in the sun, really, because he plays some amazing stuff, really, both on the Les Paul and on the Strat. You never knew which guitar he was playing on the records. He's got a great sound. And then he showed up in England, I believe, with this tiger skin type Strat. Which,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I saw a photograph of it actually.
Yeah.
On one of those Kent albums of Memphis blues. It was all that Joe Hill Lewis type era. But there's a photograph of the guitar, and it looks. I have a vague idea it was an African guitar, Somebody told me it's called a Zanzibar or something like that. But if you ever see him, ask him, because
I will.
Particularly with all this interest in all these pawn shop specials, this one's never cropped up.
Really?
Unless he painted it himself or something. But it looked
that
great.
could be. He's such a gentle guy too.
So I believe. I never met him.
Always has a kind word about everybody.
Yeah.
Real shy in his own way.
That's good.
When you play and slide, do you tend to use a pick ever? Or?
Yeah, pick and fingers, I also vary the slide. Sometimes I use the core siding bottle on my ring finger, sometimes on my small finger. And then sometimes I use a brass slide if I'm playing the National. But if I'm playing straight electric, I use a steel bottleneck, But
do you hear a difference in tones between the various materials?
I do actually, yeah. The glass is obviously more, I won't say Hawaiian, but more smooth and sweet.
Right.
The brass or copper is very harsh, if you want to get that Sunhouse sort of attack.
Yeah.
But it's almost too harsh all the time.
Yeah.
So the steel is a good compromise, because it depends on the guitar you're
Do
playing.
you use a socket wrench like Muddy or a steel slider?
A steel slide. I have a socket wrench, because John Hammond told me he was using a socket wrench, and then Lowell George, who we played with, had one as well. They're fantastic, but you really need very heavy strings for them, because I don't know which one I have, the 5th, 8th, or 7th, 8th, or whatever it is. They're fantastic, but if you're playing more than a couple of numbers, they do wear your small finger down. They're very heavy, But they're ideal for slide. But that's my one complaint. Not that I like light slides, but you don't want them to be tearing your hand.
Yeah, that's true. Do you set up your action differently if you're going to play slide, or do you have a special guitar for it?
I have a Gretsch Corvette, which is in open G or open A, depending on, and that's got strings like 13 to 50, something like that, medium. But I mean, I play. My regular strings would be like 10 to 44, something like that, and the action's quite high. So it's okay for slide, but to get I mean, if you want to play real open tuning slides, you need the heavier strings and so on.
Yeah.
But I can cope with both, you know.
Yeah.
I try to anyway.
You did a good job. What's your favorite amp?
Good question. It's a battle between the Vox AC30, which is my first amp,
Yeah.
and the 410 Bassman Fender. Although I love the little deluxe Fender, it's nice as well. But I have played Ampeg VT44s, which are very nice, and over the years I've used Marshall 50-watt combos in conjunction with the Fender or the Vox, and they're very good for volume and bite. But the warmth of the Fenders and the character of the Vox is pretty hard to beat. So it's somewhere in there.
What do we hear on the record mostly?
On the rhythm tracks, it would be a combination of Vox and Marshall. Nearly all the lead parts were done with the Fender 1955 Bassman.
Yeah.
We took the back off it and put mics in the back as well as the front. So we got all kinds of variations.
Yeah.
That was pretty much the way. I mean, not every track was laid down as a rhythm track, but I'd say 80% of the tracks were like that. Vox and Marshall for rhythm, left and right, and then the Fender Bassman for lead. You know.
Now, on the staff of guitar player, you know, we've been waiting for you to come through for a long time.
Yeah.
What's the delay? I mean,
I don't know. We just went back to Europe after the last American tour, and
that'd have been like 84, 85.
85. And we just got stuck in Europe recording and touring, and we played in Yugoslavia and Hungary and so on. And then we were trying to sort out the right record deal in America, and I don't know where the years went.
Yeah.
But
we'd see ads in NME that you were playing over there, but we, you know.
Well, we just got irritated too. We were on a couple of big nationwide tours with these big stadium type rock bands.
Yeah.
And we do that in order to get to America, to pay for the flights, and also to give us some free time to play clubs and colleges. Yeah. But doing these other gigs you'd go home feeling very dissatisfied because you'd be badly treated in some cases with monitors, this amount of stage room and lights and stuff. Time, indeed. So.
No, American audiences aren't always kind to opening acts, especially if it's a different genre.
Indeed, and that was the problem. It wasn't so bad when we were on the same bill as, say, ZZ Top or something, or somebody in that line. But then we happened to be on a couple of bills that were totally alien to our kind of stuff. We weren't booed or anything, but you felt you'd wasted a couple of weeks of your life when you could be playing clubs or something, or small theaters or whatever. But I regret we didn't come back in the meantime, but it gave us a chance to reassess what we were doing, and we got very busy in Europe and so on. And then I developed a flying problem as well, to make matters
Fear
worse.
Fear of flying. I read that in the LA Times.
Yeah, I had a couple of bad flights, and I got my Buddy Holly complex it got so bad I couldn't even fly to Ireland, which is only an hour away. And then to play on the continent, I would have to fly out the night before, so I'd be okay in the day. It was.
Would you get really nervous?
Yeah, it was not so much fear of death thing. It was a mixture of claustrophobia and a few other things. But I got, like, this is a miracle. I flew from London to Tokyo, Japan to Australia to LA to San Francisco and so on, and we'd have to make our way across country and then back to London. So far so good. My prayers have been answered, and
oh man,
I mean, to beat that flying phobia was quite an ordeal for me, I can tell you, because it's the last thing I needed after all those years of touring and flying 2 times a day and everything. So that compounded my problems of not being able to get to the States. You know.
Well, do you have any advice for keeping your sanity when you're on tour, or keeping yourself centered? It is this rather unusual life.
It is indeed, yeah. There's also a terrible danger of between travel and other things and getting to the gigs and so on. You get little time to play on your own in the hotel.
Yeah.
And you can get lazy about playing. So I make a point of playing every day in the hotel room and bringing a little cassette player and record what I'm doing and try and write songs as well, just as a byproduct of that.
Yeah.
But to keep your sanity, I don't know, it takes you about 20 years to find out what the. I mean, you know what all the ABCs are to begin with, but there's an awful lot of time to wear down the nerves of a musician. You know,
Yeah.
so you have to be. It's just your attitude, really, in terms for traveling and flying, for hotels, for remembering where you are, and trying to keep all that group feeling every night to put on a good show. There's all. I mean, every musician has to go through that. There's no real. You just have to develop a sense of humor and patience um, and just keep it cool, you know, and just look. And I think the old cliche of deal with tonight's gig and not worry about the one next Tuesday or the end of the tour or anything like that.
Just one day at a time.
Yeah, it's the classic, but it's true.
If somebody was like overhearing what you were playing in the hotel room, would they be surprised if they only knew you from your records? Are you like a closet country player or bluegrass guy or flamenco?
Well, flamenco, definitely. That's no. I do actually do some country licks. I'm quite keen on the playing of Roy Nichols, who used to be in Merle Haggis records. And, some of the players that have worked with Waylon Jennings and Johnny
I'm surprised
Page.
to hear that. You know?
Yeah, but I don't like this commercial country, but
yeah.
I can't really play flamenco that well. I can fake it. I mean, just from my own ears, and I do little bits of jazz things and ragtime, anything that'll loosen you up, and also it's good for your mental health. Not necessarily to do what you play on stage, just and also even if you're playing cassettes in your room, I play a lot of folk things like Martin Carthy and some Irish music and some Django and things to take. Particularly if you're doing a very long tour, it's quite hard to listen to this similar kind of music in your room then, I find.
Yeah.
So it's good to play something slightly different, and country and folk is quite a departure, but I mean, that's not to say I don't play blues in the hotel room, I do, but it depends on what phase you're going through, what year it is, and what mood you're in, and all those other things.
I'm always amazed, continually re-amazed at what a universal language the blues is.
Yeah.
And how it speaks across the boards to so many divergent peoples.
Mm-hmm. But particularly this recent interest in it, I was despondent in the late 70s and up until the mid 80s. I thought we'd gone right into the age of technology, and that was the end of it. Drum machines, techno pop,
and then disco.
All that. Yeah, so this interest in blues now in the early 90s, we'll say, thanks to Stevie Ray and all the people who kept playing it, like Albert Collins and so on, and Clara Good and all those people. To this peak that's happening at the moment with this interest in Robert Johnson and John Lee Hooker and so on, and Bonnie Raitt's comeback, if you like.
Yeah.
Who would have predicted that? So I mean, that makes me very optimistic for the 90s. I mean, if it gets better and better, I mean, maybe it'll fade away again, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be a nice, serious interest in the years to come, which would be great, you know.
Yeah.
And of course, I think a lot of people are interested in Zydeco as well, and African music, and of course the whole world music thing is fresh for the ears, because I think people have had enough of mainstream pop, really, you know.
I know I have.
A lot of teenagers would surprise you. They say, "Oh, we love real drums. We love real bass guitars. They get fed up all that Space Invaders machine music, you know." Yeah. I mean, that's all it was, you know, to my ears anyway.
Yeah, mine too.
Because all that metronomic heartbeat stuff is, I have a theory that it's bad for you. You know, it's like ticker tape. It's like teletext. It's all because the heartbeat doesn't beat, and the mind everything doesn't work digitally. You know what I mean?
Well, it's more like reggae.
Something like that. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Or John Lee Hooker.
Yeah.
You know.
So I thought, somebody ought to check that out and see if it's like some people have that theory about digital echoes, that echo, even though it's in time, it's different. Where say you get tape echo that's not entirely to the second, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Somebody had a ridiculous theory, but I kind of believe it. You know.
I tend to think that there's going to come a time when music's used to physically heal more than
Well,
ever before.
and it can do.
Yeah.
Music can heal, and it can cool down the savage breast, as they say. You know.
Savage beast.
Yeah, but they also say savage breast.
Interesting.
Yeah, when you're really
Pumping.
yeah. Um, so it does have that power, all kinds of power. But I mean, it's I find it. I mean, you know, by the time you subtract the music business and all that goes, the good and bad things that go with it, you're left with a piece of music and the
Yeah.
player, and it's important that that should remain fairly, not precious, but you know, it should be left fairly organic and true. You know.
Yeah. What do you like to hear at the end of a show?
Well, I mean, if our shows tend to become very rocky some nights, and this becomes people jump around the place and all that, I can accept that as long as they've listened to the slow blues and the
Yeah.
acoustic and the blend. I don't like. I like it to be kind of fairly up at the ends, not too well. You can't pick and choose, but I mean, I don't want it to be a recital where people politely clap and leave the
Yeah.
place. You have to create an atmosphere. But I mean, I think in any one show, I like if I can hit about two or three different bases and through in terms of reaction and performance, and you know, try and create dynamics in the set so it's not just too predictable. Oh, that's going to be another number like that.
You change stuff around from night
Oh,
to
we
night?
do. Yeah, we rarely use a set list. Only if it's gone to the head time on a TV program where they have to have cameras ready for whatever.
Yeah.
We never use a set list. Occasionally, I'd say a big festival where you've only got X, your time is limited.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to have a list of just to guide you a bit. But 9 times out of 10, I just work off the top of my head, you know,
That's good.
and we move from album to album. Particularly on this tour, because we've been away so long, we're not just only playing the new songs. We're doing quite some old ones as well, just to refresh people's memory. You know?
You've been using the same musicians for a long time.
Yeah, bass player since '71, Jerry McAvoy.
Yeah.
Drummer since about 1980. That's Brendan O'Neill, and the harmonica player for about 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Mark Felton. So that's
Not to make you self-conscious, but if someone were going to put together, let's say, a compact disc collection called The Essential Rory Gallagher, are there certain tracks that you feel should be on it?
I suppose so. I mean, if I were to do a best of, that's from the old days, things like Cradle Rock, Million Miles Away, Tattooed Lady. There's lots of songs that I'd like to redo and remix. Things like Race the Breeze, I was very fond of myself. I'd like to re-record that. We try to get staple singers type gospel feeling.
Oh yeah, Pops.
Yeah.
There's an underrated guitar player.
Indeed, particularly on the early records with that tremolo and that jazz master,
just
you know.
by himself.
Well, you see, if you record a guitar like that, there's so much room for it to breathe, you know. I mean, there's lots of Lone Shark Blues is a song I like a lot, and that's aside from tracks on the new one. I mean, it's very hard for me to. I mean, if we're going to do a box set or something like that later this year, if not early next year, so that'll be the real testing point of going back and seeing what's there and what wasn't released and things like that, you know.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting, you know.
What's the scope of your current tour?
In America, it's we started in the West Coast. We worked around San Diego, all around 2 or 3 dates, and we played the Roxy in LA, and then we're playing in this area, Santa Cruz. We're playing. We played Oakland last night. We're playing San Francisco tomorrow night, and we're playing San Jose.
Yeah, the magazines. A lot of the editors are coming from the Sunday show in San Jose.
And then we're moving across Minneapolis. I can never pronounce that name, but
Minneapolis.
I know.
Prince's hometown.
Yeah, I have to do Purple Rain for him there. Actually, he plays good guitar. I think
He does.
A very underrated player.
Yeah, I have to agree.
And he's clever to have that old Hofner telecopy. They were good, and no one spotted, except one guitarist in Nashville uses one. I remember from an old guitar player. There's a write up on him. I can't think of him now. I think it was the guy who played on Dobie Gillis's um, Drift Away, or whatever.
Oh, was it Reggie Young?
I think it was Reggie Young
Yeah,
had one.
yeah, okay.
But they have reissued these copies, but they're not as good. But I'll keep an eye out for one. But we're doing, obviously, New York, Boston, Detroit, Chicago. We're going to Canada, do Toronto. We're missing out on Washington, Dallas, and all the southern area, but we're hoping to come back in 2 or 3 months and cover
Right.
that, you know.
Maybe when the other record comes out.
Yeah, but we have commitments after Easter in Europe, so we have to go back. Ideally, we should stay here for 2 or 3 months, but I think given that we were in Australia and Japan before this,
Yeah.
and this is a fairly hard month's work, we'll be glad to get back and get a week off and just.
Where's your home?
Well, I'm based in London at the moment.
Do you get to Cork much
Oh,
anymore?
I do. Well, because of the flying, I haven't been there for a while, but um, if that's over with now, I'll go back as I was for a while. I'd go back every third weekend or every second month or whatever, depending on.
Yeah.
At one stage, I was nearly commuting, which was great, but because I like to keep my Irish connection and it's also good. London's a good town to work out of, but it's naturally it's not home. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
But it's because all the musicians live there in the studios and so on. But now since the Irish rock thing has boomed, it's quite feasible to record and do things in Dublin. It's become quite a rock and roll city, you know.
Is that because of U2, etc.?
Well, U2 ultimately, yeah, but it was building up before because of Thin Lizzy and Boomtown Rats and so on.
Yeah.
The music industry took Irish music or Irish musicians more seriously. Whereas in the early days of Van Morrison and when we came out, it was quite hard to cut through the image, you know.
Stereotypes.
Well, everyone thought you were like the Clancy Brothers or just a dance band. There were very few serious rhythm and blues or rock people from Ireland at that stage. So it was hard to cut through initially.
Yeah.
But it's great now. I mean, I'm half tempted to record the next album in Dublin just to see. I recorded one. I did 3 tracks on a Davy Spillane album. He's a uilleann pipe player, and I enjoyed working in the Dublin studios. But for an Irishman, with the exception of the Irish Tour live album, I've never recorded in Ireland.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's time.
That. Yeah, it might be the X factor, you know, whatever that is.
I'm glad you could give us the interview.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Epilogue. A few hours after our interview, Rory performed a long, stellar set at the Catalyst. He played many of the songs we talked about, his own Continental Op, Tattooed Lady, Kid Gloves, Million Miles Away. He also did brilliant covers of some great blues songs such as Robert Nighthawk's Going Down to Eli's, Leadbelly's Out on the Western Plain, Sunhouse's Walkin' Blues, Blind Boy Fuller's Pistol Slapper Blues, and Junior Wells's Messin' with the Kid. During the next 2 weeks, Rory completed his final North American tour. Upon his return to the UK, his health declined and his appearances became less frequent. Following complications from a liver transplant, he passed away at King's College Hospital in London on June 14, 1995. I'd like to send a special thanks to Rory's brother, Donald Gallagher, for making this interview happen. I also send my thanks to curator Steve Weiss and the staff of the University of North Carolina's Southern Folklife Collection for digitizing my interviews. And a special shout out goes to Nick Hunt for his help producing this podcast. This podcast is copyright 2022 by Jas Obrecht, all rights reserved. Thank you for supporting independent music journalism, and I'll catch up with you next time.